Okay. All right, good. Jay, I'm the Maryland Secretary of Housing and Community Development, and we are in the middle of our Carroll County Day Trip. This is a moment for us where we get to do a deep dive with county leaders, state partners, federal partners in the room as well, and municipal partners and community partners. So today we've gotten to spend time traveling the county, and actually yesterday and last night as well in Taneytown and Westminster. But this is our opportunity as a department to not only understand challenges, and this is a continuation of some conversations that we've been having, but also an opportunity to hear the aspirations of Carroll County and the municipalities here and of the community, and understand how we can be a resource. Just quickly, I want to say what an incredible time we've had over the last day and change. The staff in Carroll County and each of your municipalities have been fantastic. Really just, you got incredible people here. And I do want to do some quick introductions of the folks up here, especially thanking the commissioners for their hospitality. But before I do that, I also just want to explain really quickly what our department does. So we are Maryland's housing, yes, not surprising, but also place-based economic development agency. It is our purpose to serve the revitalization of core communities and main streets. It is our purpose to provide business lending to small businesses. We support home ownership through the Maryland Mortgage Program. We even finance infrastructure, everything from broadband to water and sewer to city halls, you name it. We can do a lot of different things. And we're proud to be your partners in achieving your vision. So again, I want to thank the commissioners for your hospitality. And maybe just for the folks that are watching live streaming, we can do some quick introductions or introductory remarks.
Sure. I'm Commissioner Ed Rothstein from District 5, which is Eldersburg-Sykesville region of Carroll County. Thank you, sir.
I'm Joe Vigliotti. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Carroll County Commissioners representing District 1, which is the northwestern part of the county and includes the municipalities of Taneytown, New Windsor, Union Bridge, and a small sliver of Westminster.
And Kenny Kyler, Commissioner elected in District 2, Finksburg, Hampstead, Manchester.
Commissioner Tom Gordon, District 3, which is Westminster and a portion of the surrounding area.
And if you don't mind, I think other elected officials. Yeah. Dan Huff is here, City of Westminster. Mm-hmm. Sarah Imhouse, City Administrator, Westminster. Mayor Miller of Taneytown. Nan Mann, who's Senator Von Holland's office. Jessica Cook, Senator Cardin's office. Danielle Aquara, Dutch Rupensberg's office. And if I missed anybody, I apologize. I know we have a lot of other local stakeholders and representatives of our staff. And I thank you all for being here. I want to welcome you here. I had a paragraph to read, but you've covered it. So it's just welcome here. I hope you had a great tour. And you and your team have been a great resource and help to Carroll County, as you have with other counties. We're not the only one. Well, we think we are. So thank you very much for all you've done. And I hope it's good discussion for the next 2 hours, and we dig even more deeply.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it. Can we quickly introduce some of the DHCD folks that are up at the table here?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Julia Glantz, Deputy Secretary at DHCD, and have been enjoying my day so much learning about your community. Thanks for having us here.
Chuck Cook, Chief Legislative Officer, and I also do the intergovernmental affairs function for the department. So if any of you need any help, please contact me directly. Same for all of our municipal leaders as well.
Garrett King, Chief Operating Officer at DHCD, and we've had a great day. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Danielle Meister. I'm the Assistant Secretary for our Division of Homeless Solutions.
Hi, I'm Robin Chaconis. I'm a Deputy Director in our Community Development Administration. We oversee a lot of the housing and lending programs.
Rosa Cruz, Chief of Staff at DHCD, and you have fantastic towns, and this has been a really great county trip, so thank you so much.
And we've got a couple other DHCD staffers who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jackson, and I'm a project manager with the Department of Neighborhood Revitalization.
Hi, I'm Latoya Artis. I'm the Assistant Director of Homeless Solutions.
Well, with that, maybe to transition into conversation, the one thing I'll note is, as I said, we love these deep dives. I will note Carroll County has a special place in my heart. This is where my parents met and fell in love, and my dad is back here frequently at McDaniel College. He still insists on calling it Western Maryland College, so I don't know if that's forbidden in town, but in our house, that's how he refers to it. WMC.
I'll tell you, if I just start a couple issues. One, appreciate your time down in Mako. The importance of the Maryland Association of Counties and the conferences that we attend are very important, and the value that they bring is the opportunity to meet with you, Mr. Secretary, and your staff. We just don't get that opportunity beyond what we're doing today. So really appreciate that. Commissioner Collar and I walked away with our staff with a lot of very valuable information, and we're able to provide you, what was on our mind during that day. So thank you. And the importance of Mako with the relationship with the entire administration, to include MML as the municipalities. With that said, there is one issue. Well, first, I just want to say thank you, Danielle. You were at a conference we had recently, and thank you for being a keynote. You did a great job here in the county. One issue that's on our mind that is indirect to your office is the NPRP, the Power Line project. This Power Line project is designed to go through 3 counties, Baltimore County, Carroll County, and Frederick County, with its way down to Northern Virginia. It's designed to go through 70 miles of property. That includes agriculture, suburban, and other properties when it's finally designed. It's being designed, it's a $450 million project being designed by a company called PSE&G out of New Jersey. It is being directed by the federal government. I'm giving you a little bit of background on this because of its importance, because it's coming right through our front yard and backyard. We've written multiple letters to the governor. We've written tri-county letters with Baltimore County and Frederick County to the governor and to the PSC to share with them, our frustration that there's a problem out there, and allow us to become part of the solution and not just shove it down our throat. And we met with the governor during Mako, having the same conversation, and he said he absolutely agrees there should be a process. The reason I'm bringing it up to you, although it's aside from your direct role and mission, it is something that is affecting us every day. So getting the administration on board, the entire Moore Miller administration on board and understanding its impact that it's going to have on something that you saw firsthand today, the culture of Carroll County, the beauty of Carroll County, the intent of having 100,000 acres of preserved in perpetuity of Carroll County property is at jeopardy if this project continues on the azimuth that it's continuing. So I want this to be on your mind. Have the ability to inject when necessary and appropriate with your level meetings. I don't know if you knew any of this. I imagine you did, at least from the headlines. The depth that I don't know. if there's things that you can do that we can leverage, that'd be great. If there's things that you can do to leverage, that'd be really appreciated.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Well, Commissioner, thank you. There are definitely parts of your remarks that are new to me, some of the details, as well as the length of time that's been in discussion. I think as has been reported in the media, there is a general sense among the general public that this is a relatively sudden thing being foisted upon the counties that are affected, the 3 counties that are affected. You're accurate that this is outside of my wheelhouse. But what I will say is, the thing that's in our DNA as a division of state government, DHCD, is that we care about making places that people want to invest in, that people want to call home, that people want to shop in and visit and spend their dollars in. We had a conversation earlier today about on the bus about Carroll County's economy, the manufacturing opportunities that exist here, and some of the I was really impressed. Some of the rather large manufacturers that exist here, private employers that exist here, but also the importance of the agricultural and tourism economies here. There may not be much that the rolling landscape of Carroll County has in common with the flat Eastern Shore, but one of the things that we do share in common as a son of the Eastern Shore is that the symbiotic relationship between thriving, healthy towns and a preserved landscape, not only for the agricultural commodities produced there, but also just for the beauty and what people want to see and visit. Those two things, that symbiotic relationship, lead to the most robust economies in rural Maryland, or non-urban Maryland, right? And so that's something we want to preserve and protect. I have been through power line processes on the Eastern Shore. And I have been there in the trenches on those fights, and it's not easy. Whether it's PJM or the other entities that create these plans
And this is PJM directed, but yes.
out of New Jersey and elsewhere. I think it can feel very much as if it's a thing happening to us and not a thing happening with us. So what I can promise you out of this is that as a representative of the Moore-Miller administration, I will continue to work with my cabinet colleagues and to advise the governor in a way that supports those very values that I just spoke to, which I'm 100% confident in are values that the governor holds. I have learned a little bit more about some of the demand side recently, the data centers and some of the job and economic development opportunities that do drive this. But as with all things, there's got to be balance. And so I assure you, I promise you, I will be a voice for that balance. I can't promise you outcomes because it's, again, not in my wheelhouse, but I'll be a partner in the process.
And that's the intent. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Secretary, everybody, thank you for coming out to visit us again today. It was very fun riding with you on the bus today, and I would like to bring up the topic of affordability and availability of housing. Not just in general, but also specifically for seniors, for first-time home buyers, and for young professionals. In this county and in other counties across the state, it is an issue that we are confronting. And looking at different trends in housing right now, in the building of houses, you see things like boxable houses, modular houses, the collapsible houses, tiny houses. And so from state perspective, any government sets the conditions in which a market operates. And so from the state's perspective, are there changes we can make with zoning? Are there changes we can make with regulations? Are there changes that we can make anywhere that would enable the building of alternative kinds of houses that would enable senior citizens, young people, young professionals to be able to buy houses?
Simple answer, yes. Allow me to expand upon that. you are 100% right that government sets the conditions upon which a market will operate. And setting those conditions for success, and success being defined as a state with a growing economy and a state where the families that live here can afford their rent or their mortgage. That's success, at least from where I sit. And I think we have contributed to the conditions of an unaffordable housing market. Now, let's be clear. 2008, we started down this track, and it wasn't decisions of local governments or state governments that got us off course. It was macroeconomic conditions that got us off course. But we stopped building as a nation, and this is an American problem, not just a Maryland problem. We stopped building housing, anything close to the way we used to build housing in 2008. And so we have never gotten back on course. Now, if you look at a chart, it's kind of like, here's how we used to build, and then it plummeted, and we've kind of gone up a little bit. We've done marginally better than we did maybe from 2008 to 2015, but not a lot better. We got a long way to go. Housing market is different from other commodities in that there are certain fixed prices that are subject to speculation, or fixed inputs that are subject to speculation, like land, right? And that's different from many other commodities. But in totality, the housing market, the product of a housing unit, acts with the same pressures and same fundamentals as most other markets. Supply and demand are in full effect. We stop building. We have less supply. Demand hasn't decreased significantly. America is still a growing nation. And so what happens? Prices increase. So we still have that as a reality. And if I were to categorize the two buckets of things that we can influence, because let's be honest, nobody in this room can control global interest rates. We can't control the price of plywood. We can't control supply chain problems for the electrical equipment that is always slow getting into projects. But we can influence things in two buckets. One is financial mechanisms. And so we do that sometimes by government subsidy. So we've got programs like our state revitalization programs, which contribute to closing gaps in projects, and not just housing projects, but also other economic development projects. And then we've got regulatory barriers. And those regulatory barriers exist at the state level. They, in some cases, exist at the federal level, and they exist at the local level. And as a person who spent 10 years as an elected official in local government, and years before that as a planning commissioner and a housing commissioner in local government, we sometimes get in our own way. I've been guilty of that as anybody. And, it took me a while before I realized just how important it was to change the environment of doing business in my community. Now, I'm confident, I've met a lot of the local elected officials here, that this is a business-friendly community, a community that, wants appropriate growth at an appropriate pace that reflects the values of this community, that reflects the physical form that this community wants. I think all of that's true. But the mechanics can gum up the works. And that is, by the way, not a critique of anybody who you have employed in county government or any of the municipal governments. It's the nature of process. It's just the nature of process. And it's a tension that will always exist in government, in part because the way we set that relationship up is private sector, you do the building of things. Public sector, we do the regulating of things. Thus, we are set up to say no or slow down. That's how we're set up. So you sit on your side of the table, private sector, we sit on our side of the table, public sector. And so it makes it really difficult when the public sector is saying, oh gosh, we got to speed things up, but you're on the slow things down side of the table. It makes it really difficult to change that dynamic. And there are so many other pressures: public opinion, impacts on neighbors, environmental sensitivity, the conservation and land preservation goals that we have as a community. All of those things are challenges that shape the built environment and shape our housing market. But fundamentally, the reason why we have an affordability problem is supply. Now, we solve it not purely with an increase in production, but an increase in production has to happen to address it. There are other things we have to do also. We have to have guaranteed affordable housing, right? We have to integrate that in. And to the best extent possible, we have to do a better job of not concentrating poverty when we do it. It's really tough because all of the federal programs that exist, the federal program that exists that creates almost 100% of the affordable housing in America, those programs are set up to concentrate persons with low income in one building. And, we as human beings have a reaction to that. Now, the reaction might be, I don't think that helps contribute positively to the economy in my neighborhood, or that's a really awful way to build community because we're concentrating poverty. And shouldn't we be diversifying? Shouldn't we be desegregating socioeconomically? And I think the answer to that is yes. So how can we collectively work on this issue? I think the state has a role to play. I think we saw that in last session. The General Assembly passed the Housing Expansion Affordability Act, which essentially says that the state's long-term approach to having a voice in statewide issues with respect to land use was to say there are certain places that, due to the importance of the natural environment or habitat, we are going to say shouldn't have high density housing. They should at most have some very low density housing. And so we do that through stormwater regulation, the septics bill. And so the state has, essentially cast a wide net and said that's just the law of the land in ag land, in the A1. What we've never done is finish the conversation as the so-called smart growth state and said, oh, by the way, those places where we do think you should build housing, those places where you've run infrastructure, those places where you've invested your resources, we should incentivize. And so Housing Expansion Affordability Act offers density bonuses to incentivize action. Now, it also requires affordable housing to be integrated, integrating market and affordable housing. But that's a piece of the conversation, I think. I also think, I'm going to put my municipal league hat back on, my former mayor hat on for a second. I also think it's possible for us at the local level to say, where can we incentivize the action that we want to see? So if we can, as a community, articulate, hey, here's our growth areas. These are the places where we're willing to see development. We know we need more housing in those areas. Not out, in our ag preserve, not out in areas that are ecologically sensitive, but in those areas where we think it's appropriate. What can we do to incentivize action from the private sector? I have seen great programs of streamlining permitting processes. Moving certain types of projects, such as those that integrate affordability, to the top of the permitting timeline, having pre-approved plans for certain types of buildings. You bring up a great idea with respect to manufactured and modular housing. Housing that is, by definition, going to be cheaper to build is going to be more affordable to the consumer, to the homeowner or renter. I think all of those are really, really good ideas. And I think some mix of that could be the Carroll County solution. And I think the Carroll County solution has to be different from the Anne Arundel County solution or the Wycomico County solution.
And so,
go ahead.
So how can we as a county work with you to make some of those changes at the state level? Is it just a question of supporting you through the legislative session? Is it a question of expressing our support in the form of a letter? I mean, what's going to be most convenient or helpful to you to be able to carry through some of these changes to help reflect those changes in the housing market? I'm gonna answer that, and then I'm gonna ask Chuck to weigh in on that too. But I would say that last year, partnering with MACO's legislative committee and partnering with MML's legislative committee early, before session start, long before session starts, really helped shape legislation, and not just the governor's bills, but also other legislation. So that helps. And then, yes, showing up during session, and saying, hey, look, we know we've got a problem as a state. It's affecting our families in our community. Rents are ridiculous.
home prices are skyrocketing. We're seeing increased homelessness in many communities. All those things are connected to the scarcity issue, the supply issue that we have. And so please, State of Maryland, step up and help us. Because here's what we're doing, right? And I'm sure you all can articulate a list of here's what we're doing. We care about our residents and affordability of housing. What are you doing, state? And here's a suggestion, right? So I think that would be tremendously helpful. It's both informative of and influential upon the members of the General Assembly that have to end up voting on this stuff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I don't have much more to add. That's why it's so easy to work for this guy. But in all honesty to your question, too, and going back to the MACO and MML conversation from last session, is we've started those conversations with them now, too. So we're in the process of actually putting together our legislative package with the governor's office, determining what we can do moving forward. And so it would be incredibly helpful to continue these conversations with the commissioners as well, keep you involved in the process of what's coming up through MACO, obviously, through MML for our municipal leaders out here, but also just to have that open line of communication so that you can pick up the phone and call, hey, I heard this, what's going on with this bill, and it makes it a lot easier for us to work with you directly, too. So, yes on a letter. When we come out with our legislative agenda, we would love to have the Carroll County Commissioners' support on things. But absolutely, everything you just said, that partnership is incredibly important for us.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I agree with you about the MACO legislative priorities, and we're working ourselves through that now to get down to 4 or 5. I think we're about 11 or 12, but we'll get there. I think we have a meeting next week to get the priorities down. The secondary tertiary effects about the Housing Act exist. And, the housing going into state property, into Springfield is a good example because a municipality can accept the housing into an area, but the logistics that surround it and the conditions that surround it, like schools and infrastructure, may not exist and is then incumbent on the county or put back on the county to make it happen. So if housing occurs in Sykesville, in Springfield, housing, state institution, Sykesville Middle School is close to overcapacity. What are we going to do to make those fixes? Getting the state to understand these impacts are really important as opposed to just make it happen. And what you said, Mr. Secretary, really resonates is a solution here in Carroll County is not a solution in Anne Arundel County or Baltimore City or Baltimore County. So therefore, it may be a good answer for one state property, but not for all state properties. So that act that the governor signed with the 4, areas could be also broken out even more and be identified that way because it puts us in a bind if we move forward and we don't have the conditions.
Yeah, and look, I realize that's a particularly sensitive property, and I think there are several court cases that are revolving around in the judiciary, right? But what I would also say is setting aside that aspect of that's a complex property. Let's talk about the fundamentals there that you're really getting at, which are what's proposed is a lot of units on a property. And there's a little disagreement between municipality and developer on what should be on that property. And so, what comes of that, I don't know. But we know that if housing is built near the scale as proposed, sure, it will have an impact on roads and water and sewer and schools, as all housing can. What we also know, though, is that the thing that primarily drives our increase in student enrollment isn't multifamily construction. Now, I know we're talking about a mix on that property, but it's turnover in single-family neighborhoods that is the primary driver of increased school-age children in school districts. But if we generally address this issue, not just schools, but also all other infrastructure that gets impacted, there are going to be narrow cases where there ought to be a reason why the infrastructure has to be built out first. And let's use water, which is also highly relevant here as an example.
Yep.
Westminster knows this better than I think any other jurisdiction in the state, that water constraints have to be addressed in order. I mean, I spent yesterday, we spent how many hours together in Westminster, half the day together. There's all sorts of visions for specific housing solutions. They've got properties identified, they've got projects lined up, there are policies that they're working on, but until the water is available, you can't
Right.
build it. You can't get there. So I think there are times when the sequencing works in that direction. I think there are other times when it works in the other direction. The primary way that we in local government pay for things is our property taxes.
Right.
Now that's foisted upon us by state law. County and municipal government, and especially municipal government, we don't have a lot of options. But I know county, I mean, you're in a similar boat, and so we're kind of hemmed in on our options. So when that's the way that we pay for things, building has value, right? It's not only got job creation and economic development opportunities that come with it, and new population to spend money in our stores and all of that, but it's property taxes as well. And I know we don't make decisions as elected officials in order to grow revenue. That's not our purpose. It's to help our people and help our economy, but that revenue will pay for our schools and our roads and our water. So I think we just have to think about this not as a one directional, either, we must build housing first and then have the infrastructure figured out, or we must build the infrastructure and then housing. I think it's kind of situation dependent. And if we maintain that flexibility, there will be times when we say, this makes sense to, target this area for housing now. This makes sense for us to get the infrastructure right before we allow for housing, depending on the geographic area and
And it's
situation.
community dependent.
And community
I
dependent.
mean, nobody knows Westminster better than Westminster on what they can and should not build. Same thing with Carroll County. When legislation gets approved and it makes it statewide, there's got to be, something in there saying it's got, the conditions have to be met at the community level. And that's.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the critiques of the Housing Expansion Affordability Act is that it's pretty narrow generally, in terms of what it's focused on. And so will it solve the housing crisis? No. No. But what it does is it says, just as, again, we express our values in terms of state law through a shaping of the natural environment, through where things can't be built, we also care about the human beings and that they can afford to live in our communities. If we care that much about, where our crabs and our striped bass are, and we do, I know we all do, let's also care about, Johnny and Susie and where they're living and what kind of conditions they're in, and whether or not their mom and dad can afford to pay the mortgage. So I think both values are important, and those are statewide values, and that's why it's appropriate for the state to have a shaping influence, but not a usurping of local land use decision. Because again, I think it's possible and important for both of these things to be true, that at the end of the day, so many of the land use decisions will get made at the local level. And we can shape that context again, a relief valve, if you will, in terms of the market and saying what's possible, not saying this is the solution.
Appreciate it, thanks.
I have two very different questions, but I'll stay on affordable housing first. And I love your answer on school populations, because people do not understand that, and they are so afraid of that, and that's not what drives school population. So I love that answer. Back to affordable housing, we talked transmission line, which isn't going to benefit us whatsoever. Our electric bills are all going to go up in the next year or two. Fees from Annapolis this year went up. Extremely went up in some cases. MDE is doubling their efforts on stormwater management, water quality, and all of that. And I like what you, and utilities are costing us more, reforestation, all of those, and I love what you just said. We care about the bay, but we gotta care about the individuals too. Affordable housing, all of those things. I sold a lot to a guy that wanted to build this year. He's not building. He planned very well for his house. All the fees, everything I just mentioned is killing him. He can't afford it right now. And the smaller the house, the bigger impact those things are. So what we gotta, I understand, we all care about the environment. I think Maryland's done very well with the environment. And if we don't watch it, we're not gonna have any affordable housing because of all the regs. And what, you said you can talk to the cabinet members, so where are we with that?
Yeah, look, if ever you as local leaders, local elected officials feel like the state is beating you up about overregulation, remember, we have mirrors and we can look in them and we can be reminded that we've got that problem too. That we present a lot of barriers to expedient development of things that should be allowed otherwise, right? I mean, nobody is suggesting, I've not heard anybody suggest that we should be building in the places that we have long intended to protect, right? I have not heard anybody suggest, but the argument often gets framed that way. My friends in the environmental community will often frame things that way, that, no, we can't roll back. No one's suggesting that. No one is suggesting that. I have not heard a soul say that we should be building in the places that we have long intended for preservation. And I won't say it. So the real conversation is about, in the places where we should be building, are we making it easy? And the answer is no. We are collectively, and the state is a part of that, we are collectively not making it easy. I know that the governor is supremely concerned with state permitting processes, and that is a topic that has his full attention. A facet of that is, of course, what it costs to go through the process. It's both time and money, and the impact of time on money. So I don't know how that balance will be struck in the upcoming legislative session or through executive action, but I know it's on the agenda. I know it's being paid attention to. It's something that we're fortunate that we get included into some of those conversations. So we get to make suggestions and have a voice. I don't get the final say on these things, but we get a voice. We get a voice. So it's a conversation we'll continue to push on. Stormwater regulations, yes, are, I think, I'd say the primary way in which the state slows down processes. Even through local government, and increases the cost, even through local government, through our oversight mechanisms. And again, not that we don't want to see improved stormwater quality. We all want to see improved quality in urban areas, in our runoff. But I think process matters. I got in the weeds in the local level, redesigning process. It's more complex, I guess, at the state level. But it's really all about identifying the end state and holding yourselves accountable. If you can identify ways to streamline, if you can measure process and how long steps take, which is something that we're actively working on in DHCD, measuring every phase and then knowing, it takes us 5 days on average to do X. We want it to take 2. Once we're measuring it and reporting on it and putting it back in front of our own faces, we can hold ourselves accountable to improvements. That's something that is desperately needed, I think, at all levels of government, but certainly the state. So it's something we'll be continuing to work on, and I'm happy to talk directly with you about offline about where those hurdles are and where costs are being added. We got to do a better job too.
And my other question, I always say I have dumb questions, and we need your support on this. State budget cuts. How many are going to filter down to us our local projects, our local programs, and what can we do to try to avoid that?
Yeah. So I don't know yet what the budget looks like, right? I know last year it shrunk by about 5%. The state budget shrunk by about 5%. Some of that is the natural decline in federal monies coming into our budgets, you know, at state and county and municipal levels. So that is shrinking. We're feeling that in our federal programs. But generally speaking, you know, we've got a structural deficit. We as a state have taken on some burdens, some big challenges to try to be the national leader in our primary and secondary education, all sorts of other things, and it's expensive, and our economy has not grown. So I'll bring it full circle. The comptroller's report that came out in January 2024 said the number one reason the state economy had only grown by 1.8% in the last 8 years, while the national economy grew by 18%. Pennsylvania grew by 22%. While we're seeing that kind of stagnant growth, the number one reason why is housing affordability. That workers were choosing to spend their money in another state, both in their housing choice and thus all the other money that goes with it. And so we've seen population stagnation and population decline the last 2 years. The estimates for the last 2 years, population decline in Maryland. That is awful news. Awful, awful news. There are only two types of communities, growing and dying. Which are we? Right now we're not the first. I don't ever want us to be the second. So we got work to do. So I think growing our economy is critical. It's going to take the production of housing to help us get back there. You know, I do think we have to have a hard look at revenues, generally speaking. So what's the balancing act there? Nobody wants more taxes. Nobody wants more fees. But what's the balancing act between those programs you talked about and them being cut and then, you know, the desire not to kill our economy with over expense in terms of state fees and taxes. So it's a tough balancing act. I'm really glad that I'm not in charge of that question right now. I'm kidding. You know, it's a tough act, and it is one that I think the administration is trying to thread the needle on right now, and the General Assembly will have to have an opinion on as well, of course. What I will also note is that our department was fortunate when we saw a 5% cut last year to see 170% increase in our capital programs for affordable housing creation, for community development, for economic development. You know, the good news there, and I'm careful about not repeating that too often, or some of my cabinet colleagues are going to start coming for me and saying, we want some of that, please. I think what's important to remember is what I started off by saying is that we're Maryland's housing and place-based economic development agency. We know that in the economic battle for talent, you know, who can be anywhere in the world, and for ultimately the firms that follow talent, it comes down to what kind of place have you built? What kind of community have you built? Do they want to be there? Mm-hmm. They can be anywhere. So what makes them want to be here? And our tools are all about investing in those things that make your communities great. That's what our tools are all about, whether it's our state revitalization programs, rental housing works, even our broadband funding. That's what it's all about. So I'm not embarrassed by the fact that our capital programs grew. And I am hopeful that we can continue to see that an investment in those types of state dollars leads to huge economic gains. In fact, for every dollar that we invest in a DHCD dollar into communities, we get $18 in economic activity out of that. So, and I hear a lot of that number thrown around of how many dollars of economic activity comes from my colleagues' state programs. And man, I did not intend for this to be me being critical of any other state program, but here I am. Our programs produce the highest number I've heard anybody quote. So I would just say that we get good bang for our buck. Mm-hmm. You know, we're all out there paying our state taxes. What happens to it after that is the question. When it comes through, these programs produces good economic activity.
And
yeah. So, and my Modest pitch to you, Commissioner. So with that, when we do have budget hearings in January, and the governor's budget is finalized, we would love to have the support of the Caroline. Oh, I'm in the Eastern Shore again. The Carroll County Commissioners. We would love to have that support.
We wouldn't mind the Caroline County.
We'd like them both.
Commissioners too, but
They're all important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
We've been called
I-
worse.
And I'm not gonna, hopefully others will ask some of the questions I'm thinking about, but I really like the phrase, you're either growing or dying. I've used that in business and development all my life, and it's true about Carroll County and the declining population, and the joke in Carroll County, which isn't funny, is we have affordable housing, it's across the line in Pennsylvania. And I hate hearing that, you know.
that's a
and-
funny joke, but
Yes,
it's
yes.
not good news.
No, and we need to grow or we're dying, and I really like that phrase.
And Commissioner, I think the caveat to that is, of course, that growing doesn't have to mean bad decisions. It doesn't have to mean reckless. It doesn't have to mean, out of character. It doesn't have to mean, bad design or cheap or anything like that. Growing can be good, quality, smart, well-designed, compact. It can be all those things, and reflective of the values of this community. It's totally possible.
And it's the same for a business. If you don't control growth,
Yeah.
you might be bankrupt in 3 years. It's got to be checked, but it needs to happen. So thank you very much, and I'll be quiet for the next time.
Thanks.
We'll hold you to that, but anyway, I appreciate you and your staff coming in today, and obviously, we've had a number of conversations since this morning on the bus and everything, and obviously, you've gotten to see Carroll County, which Carroll County is such a rich county in so many ways, but we're also very different in different areas. The municipalities all have their own characteristics, and, Commissioner Vigliotti talked about, tiny houses, how do we incentivize, and that's sort of, I think, one of the greatest challenges we're all facing today, not just Carroll County, but the state and the nation. We have an aging population here. How do we bring in that younger demographic? And you and I talked about the workforce earlier and how, back in the day, Bennett Cerf was looking at the college, and that was a highlighted point. But, how do we, and you're absolutely right, it is supply, because the supply is our biggest problem. We have the demand, we have no supply. I'll just mention this for anybody in the room. Obviously, not everyone was with us earlier, but roughly in 2017, we had 1,800 homes for sale on the market, and a few months ago, Carroll County was roughly about 100. So we're at such a massive change in that. And I know, we've had the housing bill that went through, and of course, I sit on planning and zoning, so we've been looking at that, and there's some interesting nuances that don't necessarily fit this county. They talk about railways, and we don't have that criteria. So I don't know if there's any possibility, maybe we'll see some slight adjustment or modification to that bill in the future, but some of it, we were kind of sitting in planning and zoning, and various members of the committee were kind of going, well, but we don't have that. So how do we fit that area when we don't have that? But I think I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but I think all of us, be it the commissioners, be it anybody on the state level or any in the community, I think we're all open to the ideas of how do we adjust things. And you're absolutely right. Whether it's bog turtles or striped bass, we do have to take care of people. And, you mentioned earlier meeting with Westminster yesterday and talking about the Pure Water Project. I mean, that's a foundational issue. If you don't have water, you can't do anything. So, I think that's going to be a great opportunity for the city, and I think it's going to affect both housing, it's going to affect economic development. But I just really appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us, and look forward to further conversations.
Well, thank you so much, and I will just say that I think another observation about the Housing Expansion Affordability Act has been that that aspect of that legislation was admittedly focused on certain corridors and certain places that we have been underproducing around rail stations in Maryland. We don't have a lot of great success stories for transit-oriented development. We have a couple, but we also have a sea of parking lots around some of our metro stations and MARC stations and Amtrak stations. We can do better. The other aspects of that bill, and you're right that in the kind of 95 corridor is where a lot of the action is going to happen as a result of that bill. But there are a couple other pieces, and we talked about Sykesville and the Warfield complex. But one of the other areas that get a density bonus is nonprofit-owned property, and I'll tell you that started as a YIGBY aspect of the bill. And if you haven't heard that term before, that's yes in God's backyard. I'm sure we've heard of NIMBY. Anybody heard of NIMBY? Not in my backyard. And YIMBY, yes in my backyard. Have we heard that too? Well, YIGBY, yes in God's backyard, is an acknowledgement that church congregations have changed over the last few decades, and a lot of our older churches have seen shrinking congregations and growing real estate assets. In some cases, bequeathed land. In other cases, just the actual their actual sanctuary, their church building, and those assets often have opportunities to put more stuff on the land, parking lots or just excess land that they have. And affordable housing, especially senior affordable housing for some of those aging congregations, is something nationally that has been looked at. So it started off as a small idea, grew into wait a minute, we also have shortage of housing for nurses around hospitals, around many of our not-for-profit hospitals. We have, educational institutions, many of which have housing shortage, student housing shortages, worker housing shortage. And then we just have a housing shortage. So maybe nonprofit-owned land offers a place that is scattered across the state. Now, that doesn't mean a nonprofit-owned land outside of a growth area becomes eligible for housing. It doesn't. But inside of growth areas, it means that you'd have an increase in the potential output on that property. So I think that's one of the ways in which that legislation can apply and can help the Carroll County solution, the Carroll County answer. And the other, and Commissioner, we talked about this. The other is manufactured and modular. That bill or that law allows by right modular and manufactured housing in single-family zones across the state. There are some limitations. It's got to be foundation affixed. In other words, it's got to be a permanent house in that neighborhood. It can't be trailers and things like that. So there are answers baked into that bill. Is it broad, sweeping? Maybe not. And there will be further conversation, I'm sure, this session on how we take the next step collectively. There will be ideas from legislators. There will be ideas from the administration. Who knows how it'll all shake out? But I do think we'll continue that conversation here in the next session. And I think we have to.
I definitely think we have to. The services that we expect for the quality we have in Carroll County, the teachers, the police, the fire, the nurses, like you mentioned, they can't afford the housing. And like Commissioner Kyler said, they're going up to Pennsylvania, which is only 25, 30 minutes away. It depends on where you're living. As you know, there's the 8 municipalities, and Eldersburg is a designated growth area. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking how to be innovative to grow appropriately housing for those folks and those young families, that we want to stay in Carroll County. I mean, the census 2010 was about 171,000, 2020 was about 172,000. So I mean, we're flat. Yeah. And but meanwhile, our schools are top notch. 1 or 2 or 3. And our economy is way up there. Where we start staying flat, we are doing better and better all the time in services. It's how do you keep those that are in Carroll County, to pay those taxes, to pay, right. The money to, keep us going, because it's getting harder and harder and harder.
Well, and if what I'm hearing, I think you're asking yourselves the question, I think, what do the next 10 years look like, right? And part of that is addressing housing affordability, rightly so. I also think while demand is high, and demand may be high because people want to be here, so this may be something that further excites demand, but it's also a part of a pathway to growing your economy and growing family stability in this community, is thinking about home ownership and how you create opportunities for young people who are first-time home buyers, or people who are later on in life who haven't been able to afford to buy a home yet, and transitioning into home ownership. That's something that we can help with quite a bit. One of the things that we've done in partnership with other jurisdictions is designed solutions that pair local resources with state resources to further incentivize first-time home buyer incentives. That could be targeted too. That could be targeted on, say, for public employees or first responders. That could be targeted toward some subset of first-time home buyers if you want to be more focused. But we have a broad range, Robin, of mortgage products that help with down payment and closing cost assistance, plus competitive interest rates, and even something called Smart Buy, which is a really innovative program. I don't know if you want to talk about that a
We
little
taking
bit.
advantage of that as best we can?
I'd have to look at the Carroll County numbers. I don't have those off the top of my head, but the way the program works is first-time home buyers can apply for mortgages they don't come directly to the department. They work with a local lender. We have a list of participating lenders. But what the department does provide is the mortgage, and also some down payment assistance in the form of a grant or a loan. There's several different products that the first-time home buyers can choose from. And one of those programs actually helps the home buyer pay off some of their student debt in the process, which is a really popular product for a lot of younger home buyers who have not been able to buy because of that student debt. And so it packages the loan, the mortgage, the down payment assistance, and pays off some of the debt, not always all of it, but a good portion of it in the process.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, programs like that sound great, and I expect we're well aware of them, and I expect wherever Celine is, there you are. Are we taking advantage of these? We are. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. Why don't you come up to the mic since you're speaking? And you are being televised, because we are, and there is a strong relationship. I know
Yeah.
the partnership that you have with Celine and her team.
Right, and we come before you annually to transfer our bond allocation back into that project so that we can further that program and have more available funding for Carroll County.
And so what the secretary was also mentioning was, is that often we can partner with other employers in your area who are willing to contribute to that down payment match. And so it stretches those dollars even farther. So if you have a large employer who's really interested in helping their workforce and want them to stay local, they can come in and be what we call a partner match.
So like a Random House or a Fuchs or something large like that, Hans.
And so our down payment program is actually state funded. And so we are limited sometimes by state resources. We've had very healthy budgets in that program for the past few years, and we think it's a priority to continue to have that strong funding, but having those partner matches really help. It allows us to stretch our dollars farther.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
So, if it's okay, I think we maybe want to open it up to audience questions or community questions. Is that all right?
Yes, yeah, we got a bunch of stakeholders, local leaders sitting
Yes.
here that
I see a room
I'm sure
full.
have some thoughts. Please use the mic because we are recording. And
Don't be shy.
who's first?
They can't see on camera, but there was a dead sprint of everybody.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I promised
ahead,
I
Joe.
wouldn't ask anything
As I'm
else, so you
staring you
guys have
down.
to.
Joe Costantini, I'm the town manager at Sykesville. So I know one of the projects in our community has come up a couple times already. And we talked about potential changes to the legislation as it moves forward, maybe into next legislative session or new legislation that comes forward. Really what we're asking for is not necessarily new legislation from the state dictating necessarily how we need to change, but what we would be looking for is more like resources. So how can we change our zoning ordinances to address some of these problems and make it so that there's different options for us to pick and choose from, so that we can actually customize this to our community rather than here's the one solution and now you have to do it. So that's what we would ask for if not necessarily changes are being made, but if new legislation is being looked at.
Yeah, Joe, great point. And I would say that I'm a big fan of MDP, Maryland Department of Planning's models and guidelines. So they have done a pretty good job over the years of producing models and guidelines for various policies, including aspects of zoning codes like form-based zoning and planned unit development codes that can be adopted. So I would say it's probably worth a conversation between MDP, DHCD, and even our partners at the National Center for Smart Growth Research and Education, who we work with and we provide some funding to, that maybe we could come up with a relationship with the town to provide some support, whether that was technical assistance from, maybe not from us, but from the National Center for Smart Growth or a partner like that. It's something that I'd be open to. We do have a technical assistance funding program that we could, certainly work with you on an application for us to.
Excellent. And we have had conversations with Secretary Flora as well.
Good.
So again, we love the partnership. Again, we just want to see, I guess, maybe a beefing up of that a little bit, particularly for smaller communities, because again, we just don't have the resources to do all of that research ourselves. It'd be nice if there was kind of like one-stop shop on a state level that we could go to and just say, okay, well, here are some of the options that other communities use, and maybe highlight some of the success stories either in this state or other states that we can actually point to when maybe some people in our community who don't have all of that knowledge can go to, and we can almost highlight those success stories to sell it a little better.
Yeah. What you're describing isn't something that exists, but it should. I think it's a great idea. Where it would live, I don't think really matters, whether it's DHCD or MDP, but it's the sort of thing that we could work with them on developing. So we should follow up on that. You, me, Secretary Flora, we should have a
anytime you guys want to reach out to us. We're happy.
All right. Yeah, well, absolutely. We'll follow up with you.
It's
Thanks,
the
Joe.
way to maintain the coolest town in USA.
That's right. That's right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Amy Baker. I work with the Carroll County Health Department in the local Behavioral Health Authority. A lot of us here work with people experiencing homelessness, and it's not something that really came up today. So I know Danielle did come to our conference. She was so lovely and stayed the whole day with us and had a lot of good ideas. And I just want to know how much that comes up at DHCD, what you're looking at around the state to really serve the chronically homeless individuals, most vulnerable people in our communities. And I was just reading before I came here from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Chronic homelessness is up 79% around the country. And what are we really doing? Like, we know what we do locally, but I would just love to hear from you guys what you're doing.
Great question. Thank you. Tomorrow is World Homelessness Day, and there's no better time to be talking about it. So I have a long answer, but I'm gonna let Danielle. Do you want to start by talking about what DHCD is doing?
Sure. I thought we were going to start with an argument about who talks about homelessness more. Well, I mean, I'll start with a quick answer, which is we talk about it all the time, and are definitely working on a lot of approaches that DHCD can take or the broader state government can take. I saw the same email today. And so, yes, that's accurate nationwide. The data is showing that the fastest growing segment of homeless experiences is people who have a disability and have been homeless for a year or more. What's interesting is we're not seeing that in Maryland. So Maryland has sort of defied the odds, I would say. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've actually seen decreases in homelessness. But chronic homelessness has been consistent, right? We haven't seen huge reductions in the same way we have for some other populations. So I would argue we kind of mirror national trends, even though we're not seeing an increase. It's still a large issue. I think the number one challenge we have in our state is around chronic homelessness is not enough permanent supportive housing. We know that permanent supportive housing is the solution to chronic homelessness. And for those that are less familiar, it's essentially lifetime assistance for folks who have that disability, that condition that's going to be permanent and enduring, and really means that a lot of times they can't participate in the workforce the same way you or I might, and they're going to need deeply subsidized housing the rest of their life to stay housed. And it comes with wraparound supportive services to help meet all of those different behavioral needs, social needs, and case management. So there's a very solid recognition from our agency in particular that PSH is a priority. I think a challenge we're trying to address is the state has never had a plan on creation of permanent supportive housing. It has always happened, I would say, by accident. A program, a very discrete program within MDH, you know, that helps one kind of disability, or another program over here which supports youth aging out of foster care. There's never been a really robust statewide strategy around permanent supportive housing and how it can be funded. And it requires, frankly, braiding across a lot of systems of care. You have to braid healthcare funding, social services funding, housing funding. So the best examples of how to make PSH actually come from the local level. We have a lot of awesome examples in Maryland around how can we braid housing vouchers with Medicaid services, with philanthropy dollars, with local government, state government dollars to create these opportunities. So the strategies we're working on now at the state are around how can we work across all these state systems to make that process easier so that we can package a model that local communities can take advantage of. So one kind of tangible thing that is out there right now, there's a draft of the qualified allocation plan out for public consumption and public comment right now. For those that are less familiar, that is essentially the plan for how we'll allocate low-income housing tax credits every year, which are used for affordable housing. One of the components in the first draft is around permanent supportive housing. So for the first time, it involves having a set aside of units within each property. Obviously, it's going to get workshopped. We're receiving all that public comment now, and eventually there will be a final version. But that is one of the major projects we're working on right now, is how can the state have a more invested interest and plan around permanent supportive housing that, frankly, all state agencies share. That's the place we need to get to, is all state agencies buying into one plan. And then we're also working, as you all know, around trying to create flexibilities where we can. So this year, for the first time, we added permanent supportive housing as an eligible cost under our Homeless Solutions program, and have encouraged developing small site or small project PSH, so master leasing projects, renting, an apartment building and subleasing to those folks who are chronically homeless with rent and supportive services. So we're doing as much as we can in the meantime, but there is a broader kind of statewide strategy to pull the resources together for the level of need that we have. And we have a little under 5,000 people who experience chronic homelessness every year. So it is a significant number that we're trying to address.
And again, a shortage of housing units for those
Yeah.
folks, in addition to the funding for these, PSH programs, which is great. I appreciate everything you're doing. There's just so much more.
If I may,
Please.
I thought, tossing it to Danielle, I thought the thing she'd open with was, "Hi, I'm the Assistant Secretary of Homeless Solutions," and that position didn't exist before.
If you've never met me, I jumped straight into the technicalities.
I should have known. I should have known. But Danielle's division, which was a piece of another division previously, we thought needed to be elevated to the assistant secretary level, have the visibility of the governor. When we wrote and announced our values and the objectives, the associated objectives of the department, we led with Shelter for All, which is the overarching value for us that is driving that we want to be a state that solves homelessness within our borders, and so that is something we are going to remain focused on. In addition to that, I advocated early and launched a campaign to take back the chairmanship of the Interagency Council on Homelessness to within DHCD. We did that right out of the gate after a few months. We want to be a state that has a plan to address chronic homelessness and to address other homeless experiences within our borders. And I think we are the agency to lead that work, and we need our partners, no doubt about it. So the other aspect of the qualified allocation plan is that, really fundamentally, it's a seismic shift, because it says everybody has to build permanent supportive housing. You're going to build affordable housing, you're going to integrate permanent supportive housing units. Now, it also requires that the state shows up with money in order to do that. Two kinds of money. There's got to be housing subsidy. We've got to subsidize the effort, but also there has to be the supportive services paid for. And then if we're unsuccessful at showing up with the subsidy, then what we have proposed is that the backstop is there must be a homeless preference for those units. So we're at least going to make forward progress every single year, but hopefully we'll have the budgetary condition and the prioritization on this issue that we will drive at it through the creation of new permanent supportive housing units every single year through the QAP.
Great, thank you both so much. I appreciate your honesty and your detailed responses. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And we need more questions, but as somebody's coming up,
yes.
I think it's interesting, and some of your comments, and we talked at the Ag Center, a lot of people in your department have been at the local level and understand the local level. It's not like you guys were always state and don't understand what we deal with.
Yeah, the deputy secretary and I, almost all of our experiences in local government.
Yes.
And
I don't know if everybody realizes that, but yes.
We're learning state government.
I did a 5-year tour of
Oh,
duty in local government before I
Yes.
came to the state. Yeah, and I at a panel with Community Development Network this morning, shared that I think to be effective at our jobs, many times we really have to deeply understand how things look and work at a local level. It helps us do our job better, I think.
Totally.
Good evening. I'm Scott Yard. I'm the CEO for Human Service Programs of Carroll County Incorporated. We're a big partner of the county. We're the community action agency, so we are very near and deep into permanent supportive housing, rapid housing, and shelters. And I'm just curious, from a philosophical perspective, where do you see your priorities as far as funding shelters versus funding more permanent supportive housing or more rapid housing dollars? Just curious where you see those channels going in the future.
Great question. I'll lay it out there. It doesn't mean I'm right, but it's my perspective. My perspective is we need a shift toward more dollars going into permanent supportive housing and more dollars into rapid rehousing. But I'm confident we can't stop supporting our shelters. They play a critical role. There will always be emergencies. I said, we want to be a state that solves homelessness, not a state that ends homelessness. Right. That's a fantasy. People will find themselves, homelessness is an economic condition, although there's lots of influences and, mental health and life circumstances and substance use disorders all influence those things. It's an economic condition. It's the inability to pay rent or the inability to pay a mortgage and stay in a house, and the next one not being immediately available. So that condition will happen. So we've got to have systems in place to protect people in the interim, and shelters play a critical role in that.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming to Carroll County.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hi, Scott Swartz. Back-to-back Scotts here, so you got Scott squared. I'm from Habitat for Humanity, Carroll County, Executive Director. I really encourage you all to speak the talk of affordable housing and the needs here. A lot of the points that were brought up are so important. I think a study was done a couple years ago. The majority of the folks that work for the Carroll County Sheriff's Department live outside of Carroll County. More than 80% live in Pennsylvania. The starting salary for a sheriff or a deputy or a teacher is just south of $60,000. If you go out to try to get a mortgage for that, you're talking $250,000 tops you'll be approved for. Last week, I think we checked, there were 3 houses in Carroll County listed at $250,000 or less. 2 of them were tear downs, and 1 of them had septic issues, which wouldn't be accepted for a mortgage. As you know, Habitat, we have wonderful sponsors and donors that look to us and support us, that knows that we're going to go out there and try to get the funding that can help us build the affordable housing that's needed around here. A lot of that is difficult to do. The state has the Maryland Affordable Housing Trust, which we've utilized that too. But sometimes it's difficult because you kind of have to time your project with the time the window is open to apply for it and when it's going to be complete. So that's a little cumbersome sometimes. Community development block grants, I believe, are somewhat similar in that fashion as well. What can be done to try to ease that process? And also, what can be done to have more funding for the nonprofits that are out there trying to do this, trying to beat affordable housing?
Yeah, great question, and appreciate what you all do. I think there are there will always be funding windows, right? Unfortunately, but if we have enough of them, and if they are cyclical, we've got different bites at the apple that might be able to solve a problem at a different point in time in the year. I think Maryland Affordable Housing Trust is a great solution. CDBG is a great solution. Has Habitat in Carroll County ever gone after community legacy or strategic demolition funds?
Not to my knowledge. I've been here for 5 years.
So other habitats have, right, Sarah? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I've worked with several different other habitats. There's one specifically, I will say across the state, we've worked with different Susquehanna, different counties and stuff like that. Specifically, one that we're working on is on All Saints Street out there in Western Maryland. We helped them purchase the property. It's like a land trust. This is just one of my more recent examples. We helped with some acquisition for that, and then we've also helped them. They came in for us a couple years ago for the first phase. Some are condos, and there's a couple of other single family. And then they've also applied for us this year to help with some funding gaps. And I mean, throughout the state, it's a little bit different, what they request per house and stuff like that. But for me, I've been able to give the habitats that I've worked for a couple $100,000 in their request to kind of help. So I'm definitely can give you my information
let's
and
talk.
talk like that. Yeah, our funding round is in the spring, and we're meeting with Secretary Day here. But I can definitely talk to you. So if you'd like to put in an application, I can get you all set up and stuff like that to request some funding from us.
Sarah, could Habitat would Habitat apply directly or through the county or municipalities for community legacy and strategic demo?
They can apply directly.
Okay, and then I think seed could possibly be another option. So
you could partner with one of your local institutions. We have our seed program, which is say McDaniel or even just the local community college. You could partner with them as well. So there's a couple of different avenues depending upon kind of what you'd like to do. And I'm happy to give you a presentation and let you know kind of what are other habitats. I can also talk to my other project managers and kind of see what their habitats have done as well over on the Eastern Shore, down in Southern Maryland and stuff like that.
and just seed, that's one of the grant programs that Sarah and her team oversee. It's as she said, that's for the eds and meds to apply for. So but it doesn't have to be a building on their campus. It can be a community purpose project, like a home ownership, affordable home ownership development. It could be a habitat project that they simply apply for on your behalf and as a partner with you to bring those resources to bear to help your project because they care about affordable home ownership in Carroll County. So totally possible that it could be your type of project. Last two thoughts on this. So there's the state revitalization programs, of which those three would be applicable: seed, community legacy, which is development costs, and then strategic demolition, which is pre-development costs, so land acquisition, design, demolition, site preparation, that sort of stuff. There is a program called Uplift, which I don't know whether or not there's no. Okay, all right, we don't. All right, forget that. Pretend I said nothing about the Uplift program. Not eligible here. And And then the last thing that I would mention is that, I've toured a couple of projects recently. One that stands out to me is a partnership between Habitat in Montgomery County and the Montgomery Housing Partnership. It incorporates some affordable housing, LIHTC project or bond finance project, and some single-family affordable home ownership that Habitat built. And so they've got a partnership development project there. Might be just worth a conversation with them. That
I'm actually touring that.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good. Those partnerships are great. And the thing is, it'd be wonderful we could do something like that in Carroll County, but it's very difficult. When
I understand.
Our builders are coming in here, they don't want to build affordable housing because they're not making the money on that. Land is expensive in Carroll County. We're trying to buy land now just so we can develop it, and it's just impossible to do. When a builder comes in, they want to turn it around. They want to make money. They don't want to sell affordable housing. Unfortunately, that's how it is. So the more we can incentivize that, fantastic.
Those grant programs may be the best answer for how to get some of those projects done.
Very good. Thank you very much.
So I'm not here to ask you for money. Not that anybody did, right?
She'll take it anyway.
Yes, ask
This
for
is
money.
weird.
All right, ask for money. Hi, I'm Stephanie Halley with the Westminster Rescue Mission. And I love the phrase that you used, Danielle, of braided funding, right? Because that is, we have a number of experts in the room of how to do braided funding, right? Because that's what we do as nonprofits. And one of our projects that we have right now is an example of how we're doing that with our women and children's funding that we are getting through CDBG in order to get our women and children's recovery housing. And we're getting that money and also accessing money through the Behavioral Health Administration to be able to furnish it and get it up and running so that we can have women and children and families. And so I use as an example of how we do that as local nonprofits. And also, I guess the question is, how do you, I assume you do, right, have the conversations with your colleagues and other agencies in order to kind of make sure that that we're identifying those opportunities so that the impact can be greater and we're not just kind of, investing in many different directions, but that we are identifying ways where we can have greater impact when we do braid the funds together. And so I assume you probably have lots of knowledge of how that braided funding is working on your end. I'm sure we have plenty of knowledge and would love to give you advice, I'm sure, about how to braid, or where we see opportunities, but would just be interested in how that works on your end.
I think it's largely ad hoc. I don't think that there is a one answer, a system for that. And I'd be really interested in hearing your suggestions or hearing your observations as a recipient of different state funds and different pass-through funds, as to how it'd be easier to work with multiple state agencies. I mean, we just had a conversation about, the regulatory obstacles that the state throws up in the way of things. One of the things that we do that probably gets in the way is just figuring out how to navigate state government, right?
Amen.
It can't be easy. If it's mysterious to us, I'm sure it's mysterious to you. But what I would say is there are some opportunities where, or there's some examples where, when something's important, that we have been able to figure that out and systematize it. An example I'll give you is we just signed an MOU with the Maryland Department of Transportation that says, it puts on paper some of our values and says, we will prioritize your projects in our funding rounds for the things that we agree are important and that the governor has articulated are important to invest in. So where you're putting resources, we're going to put resources. We're going to put you in front of the line. And that, that might sound easy, but again, sometimes you'd be surprised how not easy government is. So, that's an example of the type of partnership that where our heads are at, you know, we can't, there's not endless resources. So sometimes we just have to align what we have. And then there is just one general thing that I want to say on behalf of the people that I get to work with at DHCD, which is that each of them often becomes a project cheerleader, like an ombudsman, regardless of their duties and responsibilities, because they have chosen to work in an agency where they get to work on something they're passionate about. And I'm sure that's true in other parts of state government and local government, but what I'm confident in is every day I see people that become the person fighting for historic tax credits out of the Maryland Department of Planning, out of MHT. It's not their job, it's not their responsibility to go help make that happen, but they do. I see them advocating for, you know, getting funding out of the Maryland Department of Health to help address permanent supportive housing, or the Maryland Department of Human Services to do the same. So, you know, I think we can play that role even when we don't think that it's in our job description. You know, that's in other duties as assigned. That's a key one, and it just happens naturally because they're passionate about the projects that you're bringing to bear. Right. But we want your suggestions. I want to hear your observations on how we could be better at making that stuff easy.
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, you are modeling for state government, and you talked about your quarterly convenings with all of your food donation partners, and I think this administration is doing a much better job, from what I've heard, just coming in 2023, of talking with one another and meeting regularly with one another. So the MOU that the Secretary referenced with Maryland Department of Transportation came after months of, and, you know, things take a long time, but it takes time to build those relationships, to build trust. We met every other week with MDOT, and we continue to do that, and we're doing that with other agencies, lots of relationship building, so that when things get hard and we have to solve problems, it's not really tense, and we're talking about our own resources that we want to keep for ourselves. The Key Bridge was one of those things, making sure we had relationships before that. Not that we knew that was coming, but it certainly helped in standing up programs in a really fast manner. So I'm glad that you're doing that here locally as well. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
The comment was made about the cost of land, obviously, for building, and, you know, we've all talked about affordable housing and such. Was just kind of curious, you know, some people take the attitude, which it's too simplified, of, well, if we just build more houses, it'll be better, but the price point's not coming down. We all understand basic economics. I was just kind of curious, what's your thoughts on moderately priced dwelling units? I mean, is that something you see as an opportunity? Because obviously we do have builders that want to build. They're in a for-profit situation, but we've got to figure how to adjust and to open that housing channel up so that you have people, be they teachers, first responders, first-time home buyers, that can step into a house versus running into that same market challenge of, I can't afford anything.
Yeah. So yeah, I think when we're talking about housing affordability, the sentence always has to start with, we have to build more housing, but it doesn't end there. There's more to be said. Just incentivizing the production of more housing or requiring it or mandating it doesn't mean the bottom end of the market's ever going to get built.
Absolutely.
So we have to subsidize that. I think it's a combination of require, incentivize, subsidize. I think those three things have to happen. We got to make it happen, force it to happen, say it must happen. Then we got to incentivize it by creating reasons that the market wants to show up. You know, the private sector is profit driven, and if they're going to lose money, they're never going to build.
Yep.
So, you know, we got to incentivize it. Yeah. But then the subsidy, I think, matters a great deal. And so one of the ways in which local government can play a powerful role in requiring it is through MPDU ordinances, the moderately priced dwelling unit ordinances. And that takes care of that workforce, you know, level housing where, you know, we talked about the starting salary of a sheriff's deputy or a school teacher in Carroll County. You know, even that mid-career public servant has a hard time, or maybe those entry-level jobs in the private sector here may have a hard time affording a home, and hitting that 80 or even renting, hitting that 80 to 120% AMI range is really important, and MPDUs is a great way to do that. I think that what's really important, I was listening to a podcast on housing just the other day as I was running, and I guess I'm a little nerdy, but I was listening to this podcast. Did you just call me a nerd?
No. We can go with passionate.
Turn
if
his
you
mic
want.
off.
With passionate. Passionate's better,
Passionate. I'm passionate. But one of the things that I was that they were talking about on this podcast is that an analysis of the MPDU program that the city of Seattle launched, really one of the first in the nation, 2017, and its effects were that the fee in lieu option was set far too low. And so the city ended up collecting a bunch of money, but not enough to really do anything meaningful with. So all it was a path out. And so it didn't really address the problem. So all I would say is that there's real design requirements, and obligations we have to get it right in there. We don't want to mandate more than the market can bear. We don't want to offer a pathway out that the market will say, sure, happy to pay and never build another affordable housing unit in Carroll County. So I think it's a balancing act and a design process, which can be done in conversation, in partnership with the development community. We are at a place where there are numerous extractions out there, some of them that make sense and some of them that don't from real estate development. But as we've already talked about today, if somebody's going to lose money, they're not going to build it. And you'll never get the property taxes. Those people will never be living in your community. They'll never be spending money in your stores. And so we have to figure out, how do we even marginally make sure that there is a profitable endeavor to build? The president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond said to me earlier this year that he expected virtually no multifamily market rate housing starts in Maryland for the next 12 months. And I took that as a challenge to prove him wrong. We collectively can make those things happen, but it's going to take government intervention to try to ease the things that we have collectively made hard. I think we share that challenge at state and local government, but I think that's a very reasonable policy to consider, the MPDU policy. And again, the Montgomery County version of that, the Anne Arundel County version is not going to be the Carroll County version. But I do think there could be a Carroll County version of that.
And to that end, to the Secretary's point too, if you haven't had a chance, the Anne Arundel County did just pass their Housing Attainability Act of 2024.
Tuesday night, right?
Yeah, Monday night. Yeah,
Monday
the
night.
8th. And I would just recommend you guys take a look at that,
Okay.
because it does have that MPDU piece in there that they've been working on for over a year.
I appreciate
which I
that.
think has actually been really successful, and the Secretary did submit a letter of support on that bill for the hearing.
Two questions, and I'll ask them both at the same time, if that's okay. We talk a bunch about affordable housing and getting people into houses, and you talked about subsidies, you talked about subsidies and incentives. Unfortunately, our country has had a history of setting people up for failure too. How do you ensure that for 20 years, 15 years, that they stay in that house and are able to afford it? And then I'm curious, if we don't have more questions, what's your department's priorities and some of your goals?
Fair questions both. How do we not set people up for failure entering affordable home ownership or affordable renting situations? This morning when we toured the project in Tawnytown Crossing, we got to meet Kat, who's Kat and Paisley, yeah, her daughter, and a resident who had exited homelessness and found stability there. She was a participant in a program that too few people participate in the state, called the Family Self-Sustainability Program. Really great way to watch someone grow their income, but not get kicked out of affordable housing. Set those extra gains aside in that that they are making, and set them aside for big goals for themselves, for their household, for their family. It's a program that the state participates in. It's a program that Carroll County participates in. I think if we can grow participation in those things, that'll help more families stay in the good situation that they're in. There are federal things that need to happen. We need more vouchers. Frankly, we need more housing choice vouchers. We want to leverage every voucher that we can get our hands on in this state, but the federal government's not authorizing more of those. I would also say that the state housing voucher, which was created 2 years ago in law, and the regulations for that are just being formulated now, that offers an opportunity to get more people into a sustainable situation. We just got to continue to fund those things. And then from affordable home ownership standpoint, I think our mortgage program, the Maryland Mortgage Program, is a great way and offers people a way to experience a subsidized and lower interest rate. Now, still follows the market, so it's still an interest rate that is higher now than it would have been a few years ago. But I think that plays a key role in making home ownership affordable for people. Is this a guarantee? Are any of these things a guarantee? No, they're not. But I do think they offer pretty good ways to keep people in affordable housing.
Yeah, in addition to what the secretary was saying, I'll add, the department also has programs for what we call legacy homeowners, mostly focusing on homeowners that are in the income brackets of 30 to 80% of AMI. We have our special loans program, which helps with critical repair. And so if you have a lot of residents that need critical repair work, please, contact our department. We can certainly have our team take a look and work with them as an application and see if we can help them. That is a sliding scale program. So depending on their income and their needs, what's going on in the house, it can be a grant, it can be a loan. Most of the time when it's a loan, it is a deferred loan, so they're not making payments on it. And so we can make it affordable to help keep them in their home. The other thing that the state has right now that the department is implementing is we have a large amount of money for energy efficiency for residents, both tenants and homeowners. And so we work with contractors who are boots on the ground doing the work out in the homes. And so those are grant dollars for, again, folks that are AMI 30 to 80%. And so lots of times we will pair those programs together, and the department's trying to do a lot of work to make that a more seamless process for homeowners and tenants to get both the critical repair and the energy efficiency. So those are really great programs to help your legacy homeowners stay in place.
Yeah, great points, Robin. And then to your second question, our priorities, we've set forth 5 objectives that follow our 5 key values. And the objectives are, I mentioned one of them, which is to be a state that solves homelessness. So we believe in the value of shelter for all. Second, that supply matters. The production of more housing and more affordable housing is an objective. There are lots of kind of measurable goals within that. I don't need to get in the weeds, but I can share with you our state housing plan. Number 3 is that we believe firmly in the economic growth of our communities being tied to making great and lovable places, and we got to grow the economy. And there is no way out without building our way out. I'm not saying you can just build your way out, but there is no way out without building our way out. We need construction activity, we need development, we need additional housing, and we need additional investment in great places like our main streets and town centers and so on and so forth. And so building lovable places is a key for us. While this might not apply to most of Carroll County, there are parts of the state that you can imagine it will. Our 4th objective is to build just communities, more just communities. There are many parts of the state that the state and federal government was complicit with the financing industry in doing explicit damage to, mostly based on the race of the people that live there. Redlining is well known and well documented, but it's not just redlining. Urban highway construction destroyed entire neighborhoods. We even used federal programs, urban renewal dollars, to rob neighborhoods of wealth. So we got a lot of work to do to repair that. So that's a key priority for us. And then lastly, by 2030, we have to connect 100% of locations in the state to high-speed broadband, and we are so close to that figure. There are 21,000 underserved locations left in the state, 14,000 unserved locations. We will, with the last $277 million that we've been entrusted with from the federal government, we will get there. Some of them are in Carroll County, and it's our obligation to assist you and the ISPs that are active here, including City of Westminster and your partners, to make sure that we get all of those locations connected. Now, truth be told, most of them are rural, most of them are hard to reach, remote locations, but we have to serve them. So we're working very hard on that. Early 2025, we'll be opening the funding round for that $277 million, the last tranche of federal funds that we can expect to get the job done.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Can I let Mark Ripper, our Director of IT, did you want to speak a little bit? I know this was on our agenda at lunchtime and we didn't get to it. If you want to talk a little bit about the broadband in Carroll County and our digital equity campaign.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yeah, we really thank you for all of the grants that you've awarded to Carroll County over the years. We've received 5 fiber grants. 2 of them have been completed. The neighborhood grant program is now done. We're working on NIG 22 and 23. We're going to pass over 3,500 homes in Carroll County with these grants. Also with the Chromebook giveaway, we received 5,000 Chromebooks here in Carroll County. We've given away 4,700 of those Chromebooks, so we're very thankful for everything that you've done with us. We have worked very closely with your office in getting the challenges in for the B grant that you mentioned is coming up in February, and we are getting to that point. All the great funding that you've given us, we've really gotten into where those populations are close together. That last group of people is going to become more and more difficult because they're further and further away from the main connections. We also have a 135-mile fiber network of our own here in Carroll County that allows the service providers to be able to get their connections out of the county there. So
that's amazing. Yeah, that kind of leadership too is how we get this done. I mean, the state will do its part and the federal government's doing its part, but that kind of leadership puts Carroll County on a path toward being, one of the best, and that's where you want to be. I think we all know that to survive in this and thrive in this economy, in the digital economy, you got to provide broadband as if it were the utility on par with water and sewer, right? It is key to growth, and it's key to success and survival for any individual or family in this economy. So thank you for your leadership on that.
And just to let you know that because of that funding, we actually have a local service provider who is really growing his base here in Carroll County. He's been in Carroll County for many, many years and is now really able to expand that base out. So thank you very much.
That's great. That's great. And another good thing for the economy here.
And you need, on all this, partnerships with some of the big companies and some.
Sure.
It's great.
Yeah,
that we got a
Verizon and
little one
Comcast,
going,
of course, are
yeah.
part of the process, but the fact that we've been able to help this local provider has really been
It's awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, look, thank you so much for your hospitality. Thanks for having us here. Had a great lunch today in downtown Westminster, and just appreciate everything that you all are doing to be partners in these efforts. So I know we have one thing we want to close with real quick. In 2024, a year doesn't go by where we have some funding for Carroll County and its partners operating here. And as Sarah indicated, our state revitalization program applications will be reviewed Friday of this week. And so we'll have more funding announcements very, very soon. But thus far this year, we have been able to provide some funding into the great projects you're doing. So I think we have a check to reflect the investment thus far. Do we? Yeah. Can I get the commissioners up here? Is that okay? And
wonderful partners too. Who we got? 17,837,000. So that's so far. Can we touch it? Yeah, you can touch it. I want to see you deposit.
Oh, yeah, very good.
See, brother, thank you, man.
Matt's not shy, he'll walk all the way out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you, everyone that joined us. Thank you very much.